The Ice Age did not end in a gentle thaw. It shattered. Colossal glaciers, ancient tyrants of the earth, finally collapsed, surrendering the land. In their wake, a violent explosion of vibrant, unstoppable life. The Pleistocene gave way to the Holocene, a new dawn for a bruised world. Lush, towering oak and hazel forests devoured the barren tundra, piece by piece. And emerging from the shadows of the melting ice came the ultimate survivors. Homo sapiens, hardened by millennia of frost, now stepped into the warm light. They were not starving scavengers. They were apex predators, athletic and cunning. Clad in rugged boar hides, wielding spears tipped with deadly stone microliths, the thawing rivers teemed with endless silver streams of leaping salmon, while the dense green ferns hid massive, roaming European brown bears. For the first time in human history, the cold was no longer the enemy. The world was an overflowing pantry, waiting to be claimed by the bold. But they did not just wander. They began to observe and to plan. The hunter was about to evolve into the master of the ecosystem. A new world requires a new kind of mind, one that thinks in seasons. They were no longer wandering aimlessly. They had mapped the earth. In the dense forests of ancient Scotland, a quiet industrial revolution was beginning. Not with machines, but with fire, stone, and sheer human will. The harvest was not a desperate scramble. It was a highly organized campaign. Millions of wild hazelnuts blanketed the forest floor, a dangerous treasure. Raw, they were bitter with toxins and quickly destroyed by winter mold. To survive the freezing months, the tribe engineered a massive stone-lined earth oven. They did not roast a few handfuls. They roasted 300,000 nuts at once. Smoke billowed into the sky, a signal of absolute dominance over nature. The bitter toxins vanished, leaving behind mountains of storable, high-calorie food. This was the golden age of the forager. Healthy, wealthy, and perfectly adapted. Their bones were thick. Their teeth were flawless. Their bodies optimized. But as populations swelled, the endless green forest began to feel small. To feed the growing tribe, they would have to conquer something far more terrifying. The mainland was bursting. The endless forest could no longer hold them. Hunger is a powerful engine, but ambition is even stronger. They looked toward the endless dark water, to islands untouched by man. To conquer the sea, they felled giants, hollowing out massive tree trunks. But they were not just planning an escape, they were planning an invasion. They did something that defied all natural logic. They trapped the apex predators, ferocious wild boars, and massive European brown bears, bound by woven ropes. Dragging these furious beasts onto fragile wooden boats was a deadly gamble. But this was not a hunt. This was a calculated relocation. They rode into the unforgiving sea, guided by the stars in sheer desperation. Waves crashed against the hollowed logs, threatening to swallow their chaotic cargo. Finally, the misty shores of ancient Ireland and Cyprus broke through the fog. Untouched, silent worlds, about to be forcefully rewritten. They dragged the beasts onto the sand and set them free. They were seeding the islands with meat, inventing mobile agriculture before agriculture even existed. Having mastered the beasts, humanity turned its gaze to the very soil beneath its feet. They sought total control, a world where food did not wander, but waited. To make room for their ambition, they set the ancient, towering forests ablaze. Ash rained down from a choked sky, fertilizing a barren, blackened earth. Into this dark soil, they pressed tiny, seemingly insignificant seeds, wild einkorn wheat. It was the birth of agriculture, a profound shift from wandering to waiting. Soon, Endless fields of golden grain replaced the wild, untamed woodlands. Nomadic tents were traded for permanent cages of mud and wattle. The first villages. Dozens became hundreds, and human populations exploded like never before. But this grand illusion of security demanded a heavy, invisible toll. The vibrant, muscular hunters were now tethered to the dirt, bent and broken by daily labor. They reaped the golden harvest with sickles of flint, day after agonizing day. Their granaries overflowed with wheat and barley, a mountain of pure calories. They ate until their stomachs were full, yet their bodies were secretly starving. A dark shadow of malnutrition crept into their bones. The trap had snapped shut. For the first time in human history, fullness did not mean health. The mountains of grain were a deceptive feast, rich in calories, but entirely dead of nutrients. Worse still, the wild wheat harbored a hidden chemical assassin, phytic acid. It bound itself to iron and zinc, locking them away from the human body. They were eating constantly, yet quietly starving at a cellular level. The once towering muscular hunters began to shrink. In just a few generations, the average height of a man plummeted by over 10 centimeters. Their skeletons, once dense and unbreakable, became fragile and porous. A simple fall in the dusty fields now resulted in shattered limbs, and the tragedy was written in their skulls. The heavy carbohydrates turned to sugar, breeding vicious bacteria in their mouths. Perfect, white, prehistoric teeth rotted away into painful, blackened cavities. Chronic pain became the new normal, the invisible tax of civilization. They were trapped in their own dirt cages, surrounded by toxic abundance. To survive this self-made famine, they would need to look beyond the fields. The river beside their village was a flowing ribbon of life. Silver salmon leapt from the crystal water, practically offering themselves to the starving farmers. Shellfish littered the coastal rocks, an endless, effortless feast of pure protein. Yet, the woven nets lay rotting on the muddy riverbanks. The bone harpoons of their great ancestors were buried under the dirt, completely abandoned. Why did a starving people refuse the very food that could easily save them? Because food had stopped being just survival. It had become an identity. To the early farmers, cultivating the hard soil was the ultimate mark of civilization. To hunt, to fish, to wander was to be a primitive savage. They looked down upon the wild waters, blinding themselves with toxic cultural pride. They chose the back-breaking labor of the fields to prove they were masters of the earth. A malnourished mother would rather feed her child nutrient-dead porridge than touch the forbidden wild meat of the river. It was the ultimate tragic paradox of the human mind. Pride was literally killing them, and they desperately needed a miracle that did not swim. The fields were failing to keep them strong, so they turned to the beasts they had tamed. Early cattle and goats offered meat, but killing the herd meant destroying their wealth. They needed a renewable source of life, a way to harvest energy without spilling blood. Driven by absolute desperation, someone reached out and squeezed the warm, white liquid from the beast. It was a daring, unnatural act. To drink the mother's milk of an entirely different species. The starving farmers drank deeply, praying for a miracle to heal their broken bones. But nature is not so easily hacked. Almost every adult human on Earth at this time was completely lactose intolerant. Their bodies lacked the genetic key, the lactase enzyme, to break down the complex sugars. The supposed miracle violently turned into a biological nightmare. Severe bloating, agonizing cramps, and violent sickness swept through the dirt villages. Instead of curing their malnutrition, the raw milk accelerated their dehydration and demise. The white liquid was not salvation. It was a violent poison to their unadapted guts. They were trapped once again, staring at a wealth of nutrients their own DNA rejected. To survive, they had to outsmart nature itself before it was too late. To defeat a biological enemy, humanity enlisted an invisible army. The toxic, raw milk sat forgotten in clay pots, baking in the warm sun. Microscopic bacteria, naturally present in the air, invaded the liquid. A silent, invisible war waged inside the clay, as the bacteria devoured the deadly lactose sugars. Days later, the farmers returned to find the milk had transformed. It had separated into pale, watery whey and thick, solid white curds. It smelled strange, sharp and sour, but hunger leaves no room for fear. A desperate hand reached into the pot, scooping out the pale, solid mass. They ate the world's very first primitive cheese. Hours passed in absolute silence, but the agonizing cramps never came. The bacteria had pre-digested the poison, unlocking a massive vault of fat and protein. They began straining the curds through woven baskets, mastering the art of fermentation. Cheese became their ultimate survival tool, a storable, portable miracle. The population recovered, their bones thickened, and the villages thrived once more. But this was merely a temporary hack. Evolution was about to demand a permanent upgrade from the inside out. Cheese was a clever trick, but nature is rarely satisfied with tricks. The true revolution did not happen in a clay pot. It happened deep within the human cell. Somewhere in the vast plains, a random, microscopic error occurred in a single human's DNA. A broken switch that caused the body to never stop producing the lactase enzyme. For this one individual, the raw, poisonous milk was suddenly harmless. In a world plagued by starvation and brittle bones, this was an absolute superpower. They drank the liquid energy, grew stronger, faster, and outlived the rest. And most importantly, they passed this mutated gene to their children. It was a genetic wildfire, sweeping rapidly across the European continent. Those with the gene thrived and conquered. Those without it faded into the dust. For the first time in the history of the Earth, an animal did not adapt to its environment. The animal forced its own biology to adapt to its food. The age of the weak, shrinking farmer was finally coming to an end. Humanity was forging a new, hybridized body, fueled by both the wild and the tame. They were ready to step out of the dirt and into the age of metal. High in the freezing Alps, 5,300 years ago, a man walked through the snow. He was not a fragile farmer, nor was he a primitive savage. He was Otzi, the ultimate survivor of the Bronze Age. Wielding a bow of yew and an axe of pure copper, he commanded both the wild and the tamed. In his stomach lay the culmination of 10,000 years of human struggle. His final meal was a perfectly balanced masterpiece of biological engineering. He ate the wild meat of the alpine ibex, rich in protein and untamed energy. But he also ate einkorn wheat, cultivated from the earth, providing endless endurance. And alongside it, the fatty meat of domesticated goats, a testament to human control. Hunting and farming, wild and tame, finally united in one powerful body. The starvation of the early farmers was over. The golden balance had been found. An arrow struck him in the back, preserving him in the ice for millennia. But his final meal remains a testament to our violent, beautiful evolution. Every bite you take today carries the weight of their 10,000-year war. The table is set. The evolution continues. What will your final meal be?